Israeli soldiers killed in Jerusalem truck attack. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that ISIS could be behind a deadly truck attack that targeted Israeli soldiers in Jerusalem on Sunday. This video footage captures the horrific moment that a 28-year-old Palestinian terrorist plowed into members of the Israeli Defense Forces, killing several of them and injuring more than a dozen. The attack took place on a promenade with panoramic views of Jerusalem's Old City. At least 4 soldiers were killed and 17 others were wounded. Netanyahu said all signs showed the truck driver was a supporter of Islamic State. After the initial moment of impact, the attacker backed the truck up and reversed toward dozens of injured soldiers lying on the ground. Several of the injured were trapped beneath the wheels of the truck before soldiers shot the attacker dead to bring an end to the mayhem. 3 of the soldiers killed were cadets in the Israeli Defense Forces, and 1 was an officer. 3 of the victims were women, and all of them were aged in their 20s. By law, all Israeli citizens aged over 18 must take part in mandatory military service, although exceptions can be made on religious and ethnic grounds. The attacker was identified as a Palestinian man from a nearby neighborhood. The Prime Minister said there was a possible connection between the Jerusalem atrocity and the deadly ISIS truck attack in Berlin last month. Palestinian militant group Hamas praised the attack on Twitter, but did not claim responsibility. Here's 5 more ISIS-backed attacks. Boy wearing suicide belt disarmed by police in Iraq. A 15-year-old boy wearing a suicide belt was captured by police in Iraq before he could carry out his deadly mission for ISIS. The skinny kid was arrested by members of the Kurdish security forces in the northern city of Kirkuk on Sunday. The boy was stopped just hours after 3 people were injured in an ISIS suicide blast nearby. Members of local security forces defused the belt, which was packed with 2 kilos of explosives, and there were no further injuries. The attempted attack came a day after a suicide bomber killed 54 people at a wedding in Turkey. Ankara blamed that attack on ISIS, but has backtracked on its claims that a teenage boy was responsible for the blast. The governor of Kirkuk said the 15-year-old boy in the more recent foiled attack was sent to the city by ISIS. Reports said the boy told police he was kidnapped by masked men who put the explosives on him and sent him to the area. The boy had earlier fled the city of Mosul, which is under ISIS control. This new tactic comes after recent successes by Kurdish Peshmerga forces, who are fighting against the terrorist group. Elderly French priest brutally murdered in Islamic terror attack. A pair of jihadis ritualistically butchered a parish priest in northern France, despite one of them reportedly being under tight surveillance. 2 knife-wielding Islamic extremists entered a place of Christian worship Tuesday morning. Their intention was bloody murder. The jihadis quickly took terrified nuns and churchgoers as hostages before forcing the church's priest to his knees. That priest was 86-year-old Jacques Hamel, a man who loved his work and was beloved by the local community. Next, the duo reportedly began speaking Arabic. One filmed the other slitting the priest's throat in an apparent act of religious barbarism committed in the name of ISIS. After Hamel was slaughtered, one lucky nun made a daring escape and called the cops. The sadistic attackers meanwhile cut up another hostage. The cops soon arrived and tried to talk the terrorists down through a small side door, but the jihadis were having none of it. To make matters worse, the cops couldn't go in guns blazing, as the cowardly terrorist had forced the hostages to block the door. The doors soon swung open and the hostages fled while the terrorists charged at the cops. One was armed with a handgun and bellowed Allahu Akbar as they attacked. But the cops quickly shot both of the extremists to death. They were found to have several knives, as well as fake tinfoil-clad bombs and a kitchen timer. One of the killers was identified as 19-year-old Adel Kermish, who was under house arrest for trying to travel to Syria twice last year. French cops were monitoring him via an electric tag on his leg, but he was allowed out between 8 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. on weekdays. And now many are wondering if this tragedy could have been avoided, as authorities knew this individual was a risk.
Mounties take down ISIS terror suspect. Canadian police took down a terrorist on Wednesday after being tipped off about an imminent suicide bombing in a major city center and raced to prevent the attack. They rushed to Strathroy, Ontario, where Aaron Driver was preparing to commit jihad in the name of ISIS. Driver had a homemade bomb with him and was reportedly on his way to a nearby mall. The Mounties arrived just in time to see him get into a waiting cab and quickly engaged him in a standoff. The 24-year-old suspect then detonated an explosive in the back seat, injuring both himself and the cabbie before police took him out. Driver was a well-known ISIS follower and was arrested in 2015 for actively supporting the militant group on social media. He wasn't charged with a crime, but a court order in February restricted his movements. He wasn't allowed to use social media or to have contact with any militant group. Part of the information that tipped off the cops was a martyrdom video that Driver had filmed in which he warns Canada of deadly retribution and bloodshed.
The Berlin Christmas market attack. A complete timeline. Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack in which a truck plowed into a Christmas market outside Berlin's Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, killing at least 12 people on Monday evening. Truck driver Ukash Rurban was delivering steel from Turin, Italy, to a warehouse in Berlin on Monday morning. The warehouse said they couldn't unload the delivery and told Rurban to return on Tuesday. Rurban then waited in Berlin with the delivery. He reportedly spoke to his wife at 3 p.m. before losing contact. It is believed that his truck was hijacked during this time. The company that owns the truck said the truck's GPS history shows unusual movements from 3:45 p.m. onwards, which indicate Rurban was not in control and the truck was perhaps being driven by someone learning how to drive. There was no more movement until 7:40 p.m. when the truck plowed into the crowds at a Berlin Christmas market before it came to a halt. The suspect was seen leaving the vehicle. Rurban was found dead in the passenger seat of the truck. He appeared to have been stabbed and shot to death. A 23-year-old Pakistani national was arrested at the Tiergarten Park near the Christmas market shortly after the attack. However, his DNA did not match the DNA inside the truck, and he was released. Officials believe the suspect is still at large. German authorities are urging people to remain extra vigilant and to report any suspicious movements. ISIS claims responsibility for stabbings at Minnesota Mall. Hours after a Somali man went on a stabbing spree in St. Cloud, the ISIS-linked Amaq news agency took to Twitter to proclaim that the attacker was a soldier of Islamic State. The 22-year-old suspect went to Crossroads Mall Saturday night wielding a knife. He referenced Allah and asked at least one person if they were Muslim before savagely attacking people with his weapon. Shoppers lay bleeding in multiple locations as the man rampaged through the mall, going from Sears in the southeast corner to a Macy's on the north end. An off-duty cop confronted the suspect in the Macy's store, shooting him down as the assailant charged with a knife. The attacker died at the scene, leaving behind 9 victims. The 7 men and 2 women were taken to the hospital and are expected to survive. Despite ISIS's claim, the FBI is only treating the incident as a potential act of terrorism. 2 other attacks occurred on the same day, as New York and New Jersey were rocked by twin explosions. But though authorities suspect both bombings to be linked, they have yet to find a connection to ISIS or to the Minnesota stabbings.